You can live a life full of love and light if you just let the Spirit guide you. It's the remedy where you'll find peace, but you must let the Spirit guide you.
Who made Yall Priests?
What up, world? This is Awo Falokun.
What's going on, good people? This is Awo Falokun. Welcome back to the Who Made Yall Priests podcast, where we talk about our spiritual journeys, our everyday life experiences, and the issues of the time from the perspective of two people who just happen to be priests. Falokun, what's going on, good brother?
Man, just trying to maintain, man. Donald Trump still running the country like it's Death Row Records.
What are you doing, man? What are you doing in your own life?
Well, hey, he's still messing with federal government employees.
Right.
One of the things that he's doing now that I do want everybody to really take a look at right now is the whole thing about the terrorists, especially with Mexico and Canada, right? If you notice, every time he talks about imposing a tariff, like a day or so later, it's a delay. Like, nah, I'm gonna push it out a week, 3 weeks, whatever the case may be. Y'all see every time he makes an announcement about the tariffs, what happens to the stock market. So I'm gonna say this to all the people. For those
What happened
of you,
to the stock market?
it tanks.
Oh, okay.
It tanks initially when he talks about the tariffs, and then it rebounds when he comes back and says, I'm gonna push it back a little bit. People making a lot of money in that period of time, right? So for all of you who got a couple of dollars stashed away, who are able to do it, and I know we living in tough times, we got inflation, the economy is unstable, federal government employees are worried about losing jobs. Contractors who do work with the federal government are talking about losing jobs. There's been changes with DEI and the hirings that happen around that. But if you got a couple of dollars, whenever he talks about these tariffs, go buy stock and just hold and wait and see what happens.
So let me ask you this, then. This is for people that are going to think like me, because this is how I think. I'm so scared to put my money in the stock market. I feel like the money that I would put in the stock market would be like money you loan to a family member. You got to be willing to lose it. Like, it's once that money is gone, it's gone. That's how I always have looked at it. And how much money do you think somebody would need to actually start off investing to really make an impact, though?
So for everybody who grew up in the inner city, anybody who's played spades, you always heard people say scared money don't make no money. Right. The question about how much to invest in the stock market, if anybody gives you an answer, it's not a right answer. If they state a dollar amount, it depends on the stock, right? There's a lot of publicly traded companies, very different stock prices, right? So it just depends. What I would say is you look to companies that you do business with, right? You know, go to like Yahoo Finance, right? Get you a watch list. Keep a watch list of companies you do business with, right? And so that's what I've done over the years. Now, for me, I was securities licensed. You know, I worked at a bank, insurance license. So I have an MBA. And I have a background in these type of things, right? But you don't have to have that in order to be able to take advantage of the stock market. So start off small. Start off with how much money can you invest, right? So that depends on your income, your bills, your savings. Do you got that rainy day fund? All of that, right? And so once you have those things set up, take that additional money or that extra money and then put that in the stock market. Watch what happens. During times like this is when people get paid. When Trump was in office last time, man, my friends who are options traders are making a killing. because he had that stock market jumping. It was like he would say something left and it'll go down. Then he'll say something the next day and then it'll shoot up. Back then, I was trading options, but I also was investing into this exchange traded fund called the TVIX, and he had that thing jumping. It had an inverse relationship to the stock market. So what happens is when the stock market would go up, the TVIX would go down. When the stock market would go down, the TVIX would go up. I was trading that like an option because of the volatility, because of he was one of the few presidents, or probably the only president really in modern times, who would just say things and the stock market would react immediately. So for everybody out there, again, you have, you know what you got coming in. You know, you got a spreadsheet set up with your bills and everything like that. You have that emergency fund set aside for emergencies. Whatever that dollar amount is, you got you some extra. Take that extra, invest it in the stock market. Again, go to Yahoo Finance. You can go ahead and create a watch list with whatever companies, like I said, that you use. You know, everybody goes to Walmart. Everybody, you know, buys gas. You know, you might be a sneakerhead and you buying Jordans all the time. Well, do Nike. You know, the products we use, like detergents, things like that. Maybe you do Procter and Gamble. Maybe you own a whole bunch of pharmaceuticals. Might want to look up companies like Eli Whitney, whatever the case may be, you know, or Walgreens, for instance. Whatever it is that you do, make a watch list with those companies. If you go in a grocery store like Kroger, put that in your watch list. Start small, start putting money in there, and watch what happens. By the time he leaves, you will be paid. Trust me.
I trust you. I trust you, man. So what we got for the people today, man? I think we got a good treat for the people today.
Yeah, we got a good treat, man. So last season we had on Awo Falokun Fatumbi. He came in, man. People loved that episode. You know, we both watched it again, and when we loved that episode, and we, you know, we keep in contact with Baba, and he said it was time for us to get back on because he had some things he wanted to say to the people. So we're about to go ahead and throw it to Awo Falokun so we can talk about metaphysics.
Shay.
Boy, Baba, thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you. This is always a pleasure. I enjoyed our last interaction. And, you know, for me, talking about Ifa theology is a process of clarifying it, because you need to really be able to articulate what you think is true in a way that people can understand, and the feedback fine tunes that. So I really encourage us as Awos to get together as often as possible and share our ideas and do it without acrimony. You know, we can disagree about everything I talk about today and still be friends. You know, I judge a character by how people treat my mom and my kids, not by whether they agree with me. You know.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
See, but you guys must have impressed me because you got me all dressed up for this.
You're looking good, Bob. Looking good,
right.
Bob.
You look good. You look good.
So to kind of just bring the family into what we're going to be talking about today. So a couple of months ago, Terrance Howard was on Joe Rogan, or several months ago, Terrance Howard was on Joe Rogan, and he brought up a lot of things in regards to science, metaphysics, things of that nature, mathematics. And then after that, he did a couple rounds on forbidden knowledge with Billy Carson, and the science community went crazy with all these different things that he had came out with. And I noticed right around that time, Bobby, you started posting things on your Egg Bay page talking about how spot on Terrance Howard was. And then so you and I talked about bringing this information to the masses, especially how it relates to our spiritual practice. So we want to go over a couple of things about that Terrance Howard talked about, so you can kind of peel back the onion and help us understand what in the word he was talking about.
Right.
But to kind of start it off, because a lot of these things come under the umbrella of metaphysics. So can you please explain to the people what exactly metaphysics is?
Yeah,
Yes.
metaphysics is any theoretical information that explains the generation of the physical universe. So we have laws of physics based on observation. We can say rain falls on the soil and creates a river. That's a physical law of nature. But if you want to know the generation of water as a cosmic principle, then you go to metaphysics, and that's highly speculative. So in a sense, metaphysics leads to physics. A lot of metaphysics is spiritual based because there's no way to really test a lot of metaphysical principles in a laboratory other than to notice how a particular principle seems to have a direct effect on reality.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense?
I love it. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to break it down, in layman's terms. So, again, I follow your page. For those of you who do not follow the page, Bob's going to give all this information at the end so you can, get tapped
If I can remember. That'll work. I'll figure it out.
Absolutely. But you stated in a video, or you stated that a video between Terrance Howard and Billy Carson, it was the best explanation of E5 that you have ever heard. What was it exactly that made you walk away from that video, that interview, or that conversation between those two with that impression?
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly. And I need to back it up a little bit to be clear about it. There is a distinction in Western science between quantum physics and mechanical physics. Quantum physics is an explanation of how subatomic particles interact. Mechanical physics describes the interaction of things in the physical universe, right? It's not often appreciated, but the physical universe that we see is like 0.0009% of what's out there. We're only seeing a small fraction of what's happening around us. And mechanical physics does its best, although I don't think it does that good a job. It does its best to explain that small fraction of reality that we see. So quantum physics, as it's developed over the last 150 years in Western culture, and as it's been known, I believe, to Ifa culture for at least 10,000 years, the principles of subatomic physics create a set of rules that's in opposition to mechanical physics. That's been the great quandary of science over the last 100+ years, that there's no direct relationship between quantum physics and mechanical physics. Einstein tried for 30 years to reconcile that and ultimately failed and gave up. At the risk of sounding paranoid, I'm not sure he was seriously making the effort because there's implications for that unification, right? And the first clear unification of those principles that I ever saw was the work of Dr. Gabriel Oyibo, who he's an aeronautical engineer, and he wrote a 150-page equation. That's one equation, 150 pages.
Wow.
That creates the mathematical correlation between quantum physics and mechanical physics. Now, I'm not pretending to understand his equation, but I do know is that he sent that theoretical work to every single major mathematical university on planet Earth for peer review, and no one challenged his conclusions. You understand? And so the question is, why is Dr. Oyibo taught at the university level, and I'm about to tell you why. He had a press release where he announced the publication of the book that had his formula. And he made the tactical mistake of answering the question, well, how did you come up with this idea, Dr. Ayibo? And he said, I quote, "I did not come up with it. I was taught it by my Ifa elders in Nigeria," end quote. That caused me to pay attention. You understand? In other words, he learned what I believe is the key to both quantum physics and alchemy. It was taught to him by Awos, and they're not, forgive me, they're not the Awos that appear on the internet, but there are Awos in Africa who I've met who hold those secrets and have that wisdom and have that knowledge. And the proof is in the pudding. They're able to manipulate reality in front of your eyes based on their knowledge of how reality works and based on the fundamental truth that creation is co-creation. The word Ipan in Yoruba is translated to see, but it doesn't mean that. It means to see with the ability to shape reality. Ipan is the ability to transform a light wave into a light particle. And light particles is what makes up the physical world. So that transformation is a consequence of perception. That's one of the fundamental principles of quantum physics. And so Ayibo really understood that in the sense that he then related the key to his correlation was the element of frequency. All right. And it's always been my belief that each of the Odus, of the 256 Odus that we venerate and honor and try to understand, represents a different frequency, a different pitch in the human ear, right? And so in a way that I hope we can get into today, it's a little complicated to start there, but Howard explained frequency as it relates to subatomic particles. Subatomic particles are held in place by what the Egyptians called a Merkaba. You know a Merkaba? What a Merkaba looks like? Mm-hmm. No, I'm going to have to go through my graphics here and hear this. Merkaba is two three-sided pyramids rotating in different directions, all right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so according to Ayibo and Howard, this is the fundamental structure of a subatomic particle. A subatomic particle is a frequency pattern that connects to other subatomic particles and creates an atom. I mean, it's the basic fundamental building block of creation. All right. Mm-hmm. So if we look at these two three-sided pyramids, we notice that there's 4 points of contact between the points of the pyramid and the circle, right? 3 at the base, 1 at the apex. 3 at the base, 1 at the apex. You understand it? Mm-hmm. So as the fundamental nature of reality, each of those points of contact with the sphere has a gate that can be opened or closed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have 8 gates that can be opened or closed, and if you understand that when the difference in those gating sequences creates a different frequency, which then generates a different geometric pattern, which connects to a different stream of consciousness. That's the essence of Ifa. The marks of Odu on the tray is a 2-dimensional representation of this 3-dimensional pattern. Mm. That's a fundamental concept for understanding Ifa science. So we have within the marks of Odu a map of all the possible energy patterns in all of creation. There is nothing else.
Right.
And these multiply by connecting with each other and by reoccurring in higher frequencies. So Ifa has given us a map, an explicit map of all of creation. There's nothing we can see, do, think, or feel that we can't put within the context of this framework. Mm. And the remarkable saying quantum physics, and we can go into this in detail if you want, but quantum physics proposed the idea that everything in creation has consciousness. Right?
Yes, and we're definitely going to go into that. We have some questions about that coming up.
All right, I'll save my explanation for those questions. The point is, and here's the profound point. So quantum physics, as it was developed in Western science, says that nature has consciousness, all of nature. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that they don't say that is the great gift of our Ifa ancestors to the world, really, is that based on that consciousness, we as human beings can communicate with nature. The quantum physics in the West hasn't wrapped its brain yet around that idea. And I think, and the truth is they understand that. And the truth is they're deliberately denigrating our faith so we don't figure it out. So we can be defined by those who are trying to block us from understanding the foundations of our faith, or we can work our way around that and get to the truth of the matter. And that's what I think Terrance has helped us do. And Terrance acknowledged his what he learned from Dr. Ibo. That's significant. That's what made me know that he was really channeling the information from the spirit. Remember when he talks about being woken up in the womb?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, teaches that we're given a destiny and we forget it in the womb. But certain people are blessed with the experience of awakening in the womb and saying, okay, this is important, don't forget it. We call those people historically prophets. And I would say that Terrance has a prophetic message that was given to him by spirit because, and this is going to sound far out and people can disagree with me on this, but I believe that if collective consciousness is real, which I believe it is, that at certain points in history, the collective says people on earth need to know this. We're going to find somebody that can deliver that message and help move things along, right? Historically, you know, Arumula was one of those people. I mean, he was a real person. I've been to his house. You know, they preserve it in Ile Ife. He lived and breathed and walked among us. And, you know, Gandhi and others had a similar function in the history of consciousness. And so it shouldn't be an unusual or far-fetched concept for people to embrace. The problem we're having is that in the diaspora, we're taught that Ifa priests don't go into possession. I'm going to say, without mincing words, that's absolutely incorrect. I would argue that the whole point of Ifa is to go into altered states. And that, in fact, in the Holy Odu Ogunda Osa, the Riki for going into possession is there, in which it says, Ela Ro Shokale, meaning spirit of light, possess me and come to my house. I mean, how clear does that have to be? You understand? Right. So that in unlocking the coded message from the two-dimensional representation of the three-dimensional energy pattern requires an altered state of consciousness. But once we enter that altered state of consciousness, then the pattern itself communicates to us. So that, in fact, when you mark an Odu on the tray, you're marking a Merkaba symbolically. And the Merkaba, here's another great principle of Ifa paleo science that is ignored and dismissed. Geometry carries consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that I don't know, and you may have had this experience, but many people report, and I think it's the point of the initiation, is that when we experience possession by Ela for the first time, we have images of geometric patterns. And those patterns are the Odus speaking to us in their primal form. And so that being able to access that in the primal form is really the foundation of our obligation and responsibility as Ifa priests. Now, a lot of times we do divination over practical matters and the metaphysics don't matter much, you know. I would say most of the divination I do can be solved with common sense. It does not require quantum physics to resolve. That doesn't mean that information is not there. Every Odu exists on 7 levels, you know, the personal, the relationship, the family, the community, the global, the physical science, and then the metaphysical science. So I think, and they're all interrelated using the same language. So the ability to unpack the language at the level that we need to unpack it as it relates to the question on the table becomes part of the art of divination.
Absolutely.
You understand? So, you know, yes, okay. There's more I can say about that, but let's move on to your next question.
So, you know, one of the things that that Terrance Howard talked about that's not really new. He talked about the perception of the observer really changing reality, amongst other things. So, how do the theories of Terrance Howard match the symbolism that we have in Ifa? How does it match the metaphysics and the theology of Ifa?
Well, it matches it very, very simply in terms of the look at it this way. The quadrigram of the Merkaba rests in an energy pattern called the flower of life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have a picture of that here. Yes. Terrance told us what this means. You understand this and you understand the energetic structure of Odu itself. Mm-hmm. All right. So remember I said that the 8 points of contact with the Merkaba is a gate to the sphere that holds it in place?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we can open and close those portals in 256 different combinations. Each of those combinations generates a frequency, a specific pitch. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Do, re, mi, fa. Those are different pitches, all right? So the frequency of the Odu is what stimulates the brain to lock in to the ability to communicate. So in the Western world, we are taught that there's 12 pitches between an octave. An octave is the same pattern of frequency reoccurring at a higher pitch, okay? Terrance has taught us that instead of there being 12 frequencies, there's 256 frequencies, which means the difference between each frequency is very small, but nonetheless, a relevant element in the unfolding of evolution. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And so you think to yourself, oh my goodness, how do you learn those pitches? I'm fixing to tell you. If you were to play the pitch and try to remember it, you would fail, I guarantee. But the way it's taught in traditional Ifa is that the elders will mark the Odu, they will invoke it, and then you will ingest it so that you internalize the frequency. Mm-hmm. You understand what I'm saying? So when I first went into possession with the spirit of Elah, it's because my Baba went into the spirit of Elah, and that energy is contagious. So every time I repeat the words that he said, I return to that resonance and make that link and make that connection. You understand? So we are the father of the secrets, not because we know a lot of stuff. We are the father of secrets because we have the ability, and Ianifa, the women have the ability, to reconnect to all 256 different frequencies in a way that we can allow that information from spirit to pass through us. So essentially the job of Elah is, number one, go into possession with, the Ifa is to go into possession with Elah, but the reality of Elah is that it's a shapeshifter. So once you're in possession with Elah, based on the reconnection to that frequency that was spoken at the moment of your initiation, you can then take that, let's call it foundation, and use Oriki for different Orisha to shift the vibration within the spectrum of the flower of life and become what needs to manifest to fix a particular problem. Mm. Does that make sense? So if you're an Ifa priest, and if you have a tray, and if you have a tapper, and you have a Irosun, and you know the patterns for the different frequencies, you literally have the ability to co-create the world with those three simple tools. And you can take those anywhere in the world and really give birth to a lineage of Ifa anywhere, because everything you need is right there. The issue is to be able to use those and to use those effectively. You know, my job is not to know, you know, look at it this way. Ifa is a generalist and the Orisha priests are specialists. As a son of Ogun and Ifa, I don't have to know all the mysteries of Ogun to give you Ogun. I just need to know the resonance that connects you to that stream of consciousness we call Ogun. That's my job as an Ifa priest. Doesn't make me better than a Orisha priest. It just means I have a different job. You understand? So we need to learn to appreciate those distinctions. And what's happened for political reasons is we're being told that Ifa can't initiate Orishas. That cuts the legs off of our entire faith. It knocks it down at the foundation and contradicts the basic premise that the ancestors tried to share with us by incredible corpus of wisdom we call Odu Ifa. So the thing that, to me, that's remarkable, here's the thing that's remarkable and why we're able to, well, I was able to reconnect, I believe, with the information coming from Terrance. Look at it this way. Ifa is at least 10,000 years old in Africa. I believe it's much, much, much older, but let's go with the 10,000 year number for now. All right. So if you've ever been to Ode Ramo, it's a rural area. Very, I used to joke that there was 20 naira in town and people take turns holding it. You know, it's really based on the barter system. It's, you know, kids, you know, we did all our ceremonies butt naked because people didn't want to mess up their only pair of pants. You know, I mean, it's not New York City is what I'm saying. But in spite of what the rest of might describe as challenging circumstances, the lineage of that village preserved 10,000 years old system of science that's more effective than what we learned in the university. And believe me, you know, I don't say this often, but you know, I was given a scholarship to Caltech. That's the preeminent physics school in the world, right? Caltech, you know about Caltech in California. When I was in high school, I was asked to go to Caltech and study what I'm talking about that was not taught in the general curriculum, but it was taught by a commander in naval intelligence to see who could be tracked to learn it and use it and then given jobs with DARPA to develop weapons. So the physics that I'm talking about is not a secret. It's known. It's just kept a secret from you. And I'm going to tell you why it was kept a secret from you and how it was kept a secret from you. And it's the one point that makes people most crazy about Terrance Howard when he says 1 × 1 is 2. Right?
Right.
People are having a connection because Terrance Howard said 1 × 1 is 2. All right. So the question is, why in Western mathematics do they say the square root of 2 is 1.41421356? I have to look it up. You know why they say that? Any idea why they say that? And this is the thing that Terrance peeped that makes his efforts just brilliant.
Why is that?
I'll tell you why that's such a threat to Western science. Quantum physics was first described by a guy named Clerk Maxwell in about 1880. And what he did is he figured out a way of measuring frequency that then is the foundation of our understanding of electromagnetism, which is our foundation of almost everything that makes the world work, right? Without Clerk Maxwell's tables of frequency defining electromagnetism, we'd have no computers, no electric lights, no telephones, nothing, none of it, right? But the people who were, and Clerk himself realized that if you take any frequency and then use square root to go back down to 0, you have the formula for generating free energy. Energy is abundant in creation, and it comes into the physical world by consequence of resonance. In Ifa, we call that 2 lines become 1, dark becomes light. resonance emerges in the ether, which we call Awo Falokun. And that process means that we would have access to free energy, which changes everything. Free energy means no poverty, no homelessness, no difficulty in transportation. If you have free energy coupled with anti-gravitational technology, you can go anywhere in the universe with the energy from a flashlight battery, right? So all these things are possible when the conceptual framework of Ifa quantum physics. But in 1850, we were told that the square root of 2 is 1.412 something. You understand? So if you, the whole point of square root by definition is take two numbers, multiply them by each other, and get the number that you're square rooting, right? That's what square root means. So if you multiply 1.4123172 times the same number, you get 1.9998276, which is not 2.
Right.
But if you use Terrence's formula of 1 times 1 is 2, then you get 1 is the square root of 2. So by using that system of math, and be clear, in Western science, scientists create math to explain their theories. There's never been a problem with Western scientists creating math to explain that. You know, there's 17 different forms of algebra. Did you realize that? Each created by a different scientist to explain their theories. Terrance Howard is simply saying that if you understand what I'm talking about, 1 times 1 is 2. You don't have to believe that. You don't have to use that. You don't have to take that to the bank. You don't have to teach it. But if you want to understand what I'm saying, 1 times 1 equals 2. And the reason that's important is that he was able to use that mathematics to identify the frequency of 0 point energy, 4.32, excuse me, 0.432. And as a consequence, generate free energy, right? And then he further took that and said that we can take the idea of the Merkaba and graph the replication of subatomic particles in a way that is coded easily within the image of the flower of life. And so taking that information, he then developed what he calls a I forget what he calls it now, but he's got a flying machine that is based on hooking together 5 pentagons with propellers.
Yeah,
so the point being is that it works. It's a radical shift in aeronautics. And in science, the key to your theories being valid is the ability to engineer something from that information. Terrance Howard has done that by changing the math.
Is that tangential flight or something like that? Is that what he's called?
No, he had another word for it. I'll send it.
Okay.
But one of the many symptoms of old age here. But you know, Einstein didn't engineer a single thing, and consequently, most, if not all, of his theories have been disproven, and yet he's still held as the standard. So the question becomes why?
Right.
You understand? There are a lot of people.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing that's interesting about Terrance Howard. If you understand what he's saying, I've noticed since he started speaking about it, at least, and I've documented this, at least once a month, scientists come up with his theories, don't give him credit, and they're trying to get ahead of the curve by making it seem like they thought of it. You know, it's just shameful, all the people that are claiming his ideas are their own without giving him credit. I honestly believe, and this is not politically correct anymore, but I honestly believe that that's a function of racism within academia. There's no doubt about it in my mind. You know, if you looked at the interview with Eric Weinstein and Terrence Howard, did you look at that?
No.
Joe Reagan interviewed Eric Weinstein and Terrence Howard together. Eric Weinstein is the golden boy of. Yeah, but he's supposedly the physics in the world right now. And his only point was if you look at it,
peer
it's just,
review.
well, Weinstein was trying to make the point of, well, you haven't been to school, so you can't lecture me. Well, I'm going to have to lecture you if you want to understand what I'm saying, because you got no freaking clue. So it was, I couldn't watch it. I had to turn it off after a while. The man gave Terrance no room to explain his theories. And, Terrance doesn't always use the academic language that's accepted, big deal. I mean, I had to kind of rethink some of the things he was saying based on changing his vocabulary. That does not diminish the validity of his theories. You understand?
Speaking of his theories, though, one of the theories that I think that I've seen you speak on probably more so than some of the other things that he talked about was the topic of quantum entanglement, where he talks about how atoms can communicate with each other faster than the speed of light. Why is this concept so intriguing to you?
Well, it's not intriguing. It's fundamental to life on Earth. In Ifa, what is the word for quantum entanglement? Do you know? It's Iponri. Iponri is the word for quantum entanglement. There's billions of Borees on Earth. There's only one Iponri, and we're all connected to it. So Elah represents the accumulation and integration of all thought forms in creation from the beginning of time. In East India, they call it the Akashic Record, right? There's different names for it. But in Ifa, we call that Allah, same as the Muslim word for God. But Allah, meaning light, the record of all of creation. Elah essentially means the light. So we're priests of the light. And if you think about connecting to all knowledge, your mind would blow up. It's not possible. So what we do, what metaphysics calls crack the cosmic egg, we take a little portion of that beam of light and we try and understand it by calling it an Odu and by showing how a fraction of the total becomes then comprehensible and usable. So quantum entanglement, the images on the Ifa priest that cover your heart, puts you in that state just by virtue of putting your clothes on. It's a reminder, a reconnection, because, as I said earlier, geometry holds consciousness. So if you think, our I hate to be critical of people specifically, but Elon Musk recently told us that the problem with America is that we had no empathy. But empathy is the basis of all spirituality. Elon, come on, read a book, learn something. So that empathy is how we move forward as a species, right? And it's how we connect with each other. Empathy is the source of joy, unconditional love, creativity, mystic vision, all the things that make life worthwhile. And once we remove empathy from the equation, we commit the sin of what the Greeks called hubris, or thinking we were God, which is taboo in the Odu Obara Meji, which says good fortune comes from humility. And it defines humility as the willingness to consider someone else's point of view. And so that Terrance Howard is really a testimony to the fact in which people have no humility. How could this person who's never been to college have all these ideas that undermine the basic foundations of Western science? I'll tell you how he could do that. It's because those ideas were deliberately suppressed. When Clerk Maxwell defined the frequencies of electricity, 10 years later, Oxford hired Oliver Heavenside to rewrite those formulas so they wouldn't work. And those are the formulas that are still used to this day. Now, why would they do that if they didn't realize the implication of what Maxwell said, and if they didn't try to keep that information suppressed? I mean, Tesla understood it. That's why all his efforts were suppressed. Tesla's understanding of free energy simply mimics the pyramids. You understand that?
Right.
The pyramid of Giza generates electricity. Tesla looked at that and said, okay, I get it. I figured it out. I'm going to explain it to you if you want to take the time. But the point is that he took a natural phenomena and explained how it works. And the reason we can't understand it, and the reason the scientists say, well, that's foolishness, is because science will not acknowledge the presence of Allah, which in scientific terms is a lateral light beam. So light beam is either a wave or a particle. As a wave, it dissipates from source, right? As a particle, it turns back on itself. But a longitudinal light beam, which is generated by every electromagnetic interaction, as explained by Terrance Howard, a longitudinal light beam goes on forever. You had one of the questions, how did he know the universe is finite? Because those longitudinal light beams hit the edge of the universe and turn back on themselves. That's what creates physical reality. And he made a computer model to prove that. And his model mimics the creation of the solar system. I mean, it's too perfect. Right. So the concept, so Allah is connection to the longitudinal light beam, which is really a container for the holographic model of creation. And the holographic model of creation is the thing we call the table of Odu. You understand? So I've got pictures of it. Actually, that light beam, when it enters a ceremony, is a beam of light with circles of Odus in it. You can see it. I've seen it many times, photographed. It's a real phenomenon in creation. If you take the pyramids, and the largest pyramids discovered so far are in Serbia. I don't know if you know that, but they're still active as generators of energy, right? And the energy coming out of the Serbian pyramids increase in their energy as they move away from the earth, right? So why is Serbia significant? That's the place where Tesla comes from. He was a product of ancestral wisdom from that part of the world, I really believe there was a global culture before the last flood. And that global culture had extremely sophisticated science. And we know from a linguistic point of view that culture existed because there are 4 root languages that influence all language. And each of those root languages is based on metaphysical principles. And the metaphysical principles are the same. So those languages are Sanskrit, Coptic, Ge'ez, which is the parental language of Hebrew, and Yoruba. Yoruba is 30% Coptic, 30% Hebrew, and 30% Kwa, I think. So the point of that being is that the Yoruba language is based on 126 3-letter combinations. And each of those combinations is a metaphysical principle, and you combine those together to form words, and those words explain the principle. So you see that 90% of my study as an Awo has been to look at the elisions for liturgical Yoruba words and figure out what they mean. I'll tell you why I was tracked in that direction. When I first wrote the Yall Priests, there was a ritual that I was taught called Ifa Ya Ballet. It's a ritual in Ogboni where men and women come together to talk about their differences based on gender. All right. So if you look at the elision, Ifa Ya Ballet, it's clearly an elision of Ifa Ya Baba Ile, the wisdom of the fathers and mothers of the earth. Anybody that speaks Yoruba is going to translate it that way, except the people who wrote the Yoruba dictionary. You want to know how they translate it?
How's that?
I'm going to quote the dictionary definition word for word because it changed my life forever. The dictionary, the definition of Ifa Ya Ballet in the Yoruba dictionary is the ascension of our Lord and Master Jesus Christ to sit at the right hand of God our Father. Mm-hmm. And I read that and I thought, no, sorry, I'm not buying that. That ain't it. That ain't just not it. Sorry. So we have another fundamental problem linguistically, and we've allowed ourselves as a faith to have our language appropriated by Christian missionaries who are imposing Christian ideas on Yoruba metaphysical concepts that don't match. And as long as we do that, we're going to be in deep confusion about what our faith is really about. You understand? Now we have the idea of sacrifice. The idea of sacrifice is the Christian idea that there's an angry God that needs appeasement. There's no Odu in Ifa anywhere except some of the ones that were created under dubious circumstances. But there's no Odus in Ifa that speak of appeasing angry gods. None. There's no metaphysical principle that speaks of appeasing angry God. There's no real Yoruba word for sacrifice. The word sacrifice means offering, and offering means attunement, and attunement means connecting to that frequency that fixes the problems. And so as long as we're defining the word abo as sacrifice and thinking it has anything at all animal blood, I've killed lots of animals, but I kill them for the purpose of feeding the people who participate in the ritual. I don't kill them because I think there's some magic in goat blood. I mean, that's just a silly idea on the surface of it. But the point is, you want to do those rituals to bring people together so that you can collectively align with the resonance that's going to bring you the information that's going to cause the transformation. Mm-hmm. If the three of us pray together, it's not 3 times as strong, it's 9 times as strong. You get 16 people praying together and it's 100 times as strong. When you have 16 people tuned to the same frequency, you are changing physical reality as you speak. If we're not doing that, then we're not doing a book. So we've allowed, the Yoruba dictionary was translated by a man named Samuel Crothers in 1880, who was a Yoruba-speaking Catholic Jesuit priest. And he just made up all that stuff. And why we still are dependent on, other than the fact that, Catholicism and Christianity is considered the norm. If you don't study theology or the history of theology, you're going to think that spiritual things is what it says in the Bible. And that's not necessarily true. There's lots of different cultures with lots of different ideas on what spirituality looks like. And based on 40 years of study, it's my considered opinion that the teachings of the prophet Orunmila are not the same as the prophet Jesus at all. So if we can't start to make those distinctions, then we're caught up in what I call appropriation. And, it's interesting. The Pope said that if you were a Santero Lukumi, that you were a good Catholic. He also said, if you're practicing traditional Ifa, you're committing heresy. Why did he make that distinction? Is my question. You understand? And what
because of the synchronization between
no, he said that
and Catholicism.
I'm sorry. Yes, exactly. That's why he said it. And that synchronization doesn't exist between traditional Ifa and Catholicism if you understand the words from their original intention, Right. And I'll tell you.
So let me ask you this, Bob. I wasn't going to go there, but I feel like you opened the door for it. So I'm gonna walk right in there. So are you telling me that you don't believe in God?